I was dead for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. That was enough time to understand we've got it completely backwards. My heart monitor flatlined with a shrill, sustained tone that cut through the chaos of the overcrowded emergency room. While nurses and doctors scrambled to bring me back, my consciousness slipped beyond the threshold between life and death. In that moment, I was no longer Bill Letson, firefighter, husband, a man with fears and hopes. I became something else entirely, experiencing something so profound that even 3 decades later, I struggle to capture it in words. What happened in those 277 seconds rewrote everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what awaits us all. January 1994. I was working as an engineer at Fire Station 11 in Santa Barbara. Not just any firefighter. I drove the paramedic engine. My job required split-second decisions, unwavering focus, and a practical mindset. We dealt with death regularly, but I never dwelled on it. Death was simply the end, a boundary beyond which, in my pragmatic firefighter's mind, existed nothing. That winter, Santa Barbara was in the grip of a brutal flu epidemic. Not your average seasonal bug, but a vicious strain that sent even healthy people to the hospital gasping for breath. Emergency rooms were overflowing, medical staff pushed to breaking point, and we, the fire department, received constant calls for critical patients needing urgent transport. My wife Sarah taught at the local elementary school. A devout Catholic with unwavering faith, she'd often invite me to Sunday service. I'd politely decline, preferring to spend my day off recovering from 24-hour shifts. Our differing views on spirituality created a gentle friction in our marriage. She believed in something beyond this life. I believed in what I could see, touch, and measure. What happened that January morning started like dozens of other calls that week. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. Station 11, medical emergency, possible influenza, severe respiratory distress. The address was in one of the older neighborhoods, modest homes where many elderly residents lived. We arrived within 4 minutes. The house was small, stuffy, the windows sealed tight against the unusual coastal chill. The patient was a woman in her 70s, skin gray-blue around her lips, fighting for every breath. Her daughter stood nearby, wringing her hands, eyes wild with fear. "She's been sick 3 days," the daughter explained, voice trembling. "Couldn't get her to the doctor. Waiting lists were too long. This morning she couldn't get out of bed." I grabbed the oxygen tank while my partner checked vitals. Kneeling on the bed, I positioned myself above her to secure the mask. The woman's eyes locked with mine, that look of desperate relief when help arrives. As I tightened the mask straps, she exhaled forcefully, directly into my face as I was taking a breath in. "If that's not an inoculation, I don't know what is," I joked to my partner, trying to lighten the moment. Those words would prove darkly prophetic. Within 48 hours, I would be fighting for my own life. Within 72, my heart would stop beating altogether. None of us in that bedroom could have imagined that this routine call would lead me to discover what waits on the other side of death. A revelation that would shatter everything I thought I knew about existence itself. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. I woke the next morning with a slight tickle in my throat. "Just tired," I told Sarah, downing coffee before my shift. By noon, that tickle had become a burning sensation. By evening, my muscles ached as if I'd fought a warehouse fire without protective gear. "You caught it, didn't you?" my captain said, noticing me leaning against the engine during a routine call. He was right. I'd inhaled that woman's breath directly into my lungs, received a concentrated dose of whatever was ravaging Santa Barbara that winter. The next morning, I couldn't get out of bed. My temperature hit 103 degrees Fahrenheit, then 104 degrees. Sarah placed cold compresses on my forehead, forced fluids into me, but everything came back up. The bathroom floor became my second bed, as violent waves of nausea alternated with chills that made my teeth chatter so hard I feared they might crack. "You need a doctor," Sarah insisted, reaching for the phone. "They're overloaded," I wheezed. "I'll be fine." The stubborn firefighter in me refused to become a patient. We save others. We don't need saving ourselves. The unspoken code that's killed more first responders than I care to count. By the third day, I was delirious. My skin had taken on a yellowish tinge, my breathing shallow and rapid. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. The man staring back had sunken eyes bordered by dark circles, cracked lips, and a vacant gaze. I tried checking my pulse at my wrist, an old paramedic's trick. When you can't feel anything there, your blood pressure is dangerously low. I felt nothing, not even a faint throb. I knew I was in trouble, real trouble. I stumbled to the bedroom phone, dialed my sister's number. My niece answered. "Tell Mom." My voice was a whisper, barely audible. I couldn't finish the sentence before darkness crept in from the edges of my vision. My niece recognized the emergency immediately. She hung up and dialed 911. Santa Barbara County Fire, my own department, arrived within minutes. The irony wasn't lost on me. The rescuer becoming the rescued. "Damn, Letson, you look like hell," said Rodriguez, my regular partner, as they burst through the door. Despite my condition, I managed a weak smile. The dark humor of first responders never disappears, even at death's door. They worked quickly, professionally. An IV line went in first try. Rodriguez was always good with needles. The cold rush of saline into my veins felt like liquid life. They placed an oxygen mask over my face, loaded me onto the stretcher, and wheeled me out past Sarah, who was clutching her rosary beads, lips moving in silent prayer. The ambulance ride is a blur in my memory. Fragments remain. The siren wailing above me, Rodriguez squeezing the IV bag to force fluids into me faster, the radio crackling with hospital communications. Severe dehydration. Probable influenza, firefighter, priority admission. The emergency room was worse than I'd imagined. Every chair, every corner occupied by coughing, feverish patients. Children crying, elderly people slumped against walls. The medical staff moved with the mechanical efficiency that comes from exhaustion and overwhelming demand. They wheeled me past dozens of waiting patients directly into a treatment room, professional courtesy for one of their own. The nurse started a new IV immediately, hanging a fresh bag of fluids. "You're severely dehydrated," she explained, checking my vitals. "BP is 80/40. Heart rate 150. You're going to need multiple bags of fluid." Hours passed. My wife remained at my side, her hand cool against my burning skin. By morning, the nurse informed me they'd pushed 11 liters of fluid into my system, trying to raise my blood pressure and stabilize my condition. Still, I felt myself slipping further away. A new nurse came on shift. She reviewed my chart, checked the orders. "Everyone with this flu is getting the same protocol," she explained. "Something for pain and something for nausea." She held up 2 syringes. I was starting to feel marginally better. Sitting up, I said, "I think I might be ready to go home soon." She shook her head firmly. "The doctor hasn't even seen you yet. These are orders for every patient with this condition." She injected the medications into my IV port. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. A burning sensation shot up my arm. My chest constricted as if crushed beneath a collapsing building. I gasped once, trying to call out, but no sound emerged. The last thing I saw was Sarah's face transforming from relief to horror as I collapsed back onto the bed. Then, my heart stopped beating entirely. It was the end of Bill Letson, firefighter, and the beginning of something else entirely. The transition was instantaneous. One moment, I was in the hospital bed, my body seizing from the medication reaction, alarms blaring around me. The next, there was silence. A profound, perfect silence, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I was moving, or rather, being carried forward. There was no sensation of having a body anymore. No arms, no legs, no weight, no pain. The crushing chest pressure, the burning fever, the weakness that had consumed me for days, all gone. In their place was a lightness so complete it felt like freedom itself. I found myself traveling through what I can only describe as a vast, star-filled realm. It wasn't the night sky as we know it from Earth. It was deeper, more vibrant, more alive. Each star, each point of light, pulsed with intelligence and purpose. Colors I had never seen before, hues that don't exist in our earthly spectrum, swirled and danced around me. Imagine the most brilliant sunset you've ever witnessed, the deepest blue ocean depths, and the most vivid rainbow all combined, yet still falling short of what surrounded me. Every time I tell this story, I catch myself smiling because it all comes flooding back. The feeling. That incredible, all-encompassing feeling. What was this feeling? Imagine taking every moment of pure joy you've ever experienced. the birth of your child, falling in love, achieving your lifelong goal, and stack them all together. Now multiply that by 1,000. Still, you're not even close. It was total acceptance, complete love, absolute belonging. Every insecurity that had ever plagued me, every doubt, every fear, dissolved. There was no judgment here, no expectations to meet, no standards to live up to. I was perfectly known and perfectly loved. As I moved through this realm, I recognized that the stars, these points of light, were acknowledging me, welcoming me. It felt like a homecoming parade where I was both the celebrated hero and part of the joyous crowd. The emotional pain we carry, resentment, anger, jealousy, shame, none of it traveled with me. I understood with perfect clarity that these emotions were temporary tools for learning, not permanent parts of who we truly are. They remained behind with my physical body, like heavy clothes shed on a summer's day. The sensation was what I can only describe as a cosmic orgasm, but not just a momentary explosion of pleasure. This was a continuous state of ecstatic bliss that showed no signs of diminishing. This, I somehow knew, was our natural state, our birthright, what we come from and what we return to. As this realization dawned, I felt myself expanding. No longer confined to a singular point of consciousness, I spread outward like ripples on water. I was a cloud, a field, an expanse with no boundaries. The relief was indescribable, like being released from a hot, dark, cramped closet I'd been confined in my entire life without realizing it. And as I expanded, a thought kept repeating, how in the world did I ever believe I was just that man? Just Bill Letson? The identity I had clung to for 42 years, firefighter, husband, brother, with all my strengths and weaknesses, my history and habits, seemed like an elaborate costume I had worn and somehow forgotten was just a temporary role. I could see the entirety of Bill Letson's life with perfect clarity and detail, yet felt detached from it, not with dislike or rejection. Bill was a good man who tried his best, but with the gentle amusement of an actor who remembers a particularly immersive role. My earthly body felt distant and irrelevant, a discarded vehicle, a banana peel after the fruit is gone. What use was it to me now? The thought of returning to that limited, painful existence seemed absurd. Why would anyone choose the confinement of human form after experiencing this freedom? Here, in this star-filled expanse, I understood that what we experience on Earth, the dense physical reality, the limitations, the struggles, is actually the aberration. The heaviness and separation we feel while alive is the temporary state, not this expansive connection. We get glimpses of this state in our physical lives, moments of transcendence when we feel connected to something greater. But they're just echoes, faint reflections of our true home. I had no sense of time passing. Whether I traveled for seconds or centuries was impossible to determine. There was only now, only this present expansion of joy and knowledge and connection. I never wanted it to end. Why would I? I was complete, I was home. But then suddenly I felt myself slowing. The movement through the starfield ceased. I was arriving somewhere. The endless expanse of stars began to condense, to gather around me in a more defined pattern. I was transitioning to somewhere else, somewhere more structured. The formless was giving way to form. The infinite was folding itself into a finite space. I landed, if that's the right word for a consciousness with no body, in what appeared to be a place with substance and definition. The journey through the cosmic expanse was over. What awaited me here was something even more extraordinary. The formless expanse of stars condensed around me, and suddenly I found myself in what I can only describe as a facility of some kind. Unlike the boundless realm of stars, this place had structure, walls, floor, ceiling, though they seemed to glow with a soft indirect light that emanated not from any visible source but from the surfaces themselves. The space resembled something between a modern medical clinic and an ancient temple. Equipment hung from the ceiling, and what looked like examination tables or gurneys were positioned around the room. Everything gleamed with a pristine cleanliness, not sterile in a cold way, but immaculately pure. As my awareness settled into this space, I noticed I wasn't alone. Directly before me stood three small figures in dark hooded robes. They were shorter than average humans, perhaps 4 feet tall, with distinctive appearances that startled me at first. Their faces were visible beneath their hoods, round with large, expressive eyes that seemed both ancient and childlike simultaneously. Their skin had a grayish tone, and their features were simplified, almost like stylized drawings of faces rather than the complex details of human countenances. Despite their unusual appearance, I felt no fear. In fact, these beings radiated a sense of familiarity and warmth that instantly put me at ease. They were arranged in a small semicircle before me, and all three wore expressions of delight, like old friends excited by a surprise reunion. They communicated with me, though I cannot say whether it was through spoken language or direct thought. Their voices, if they were voices, felt like they resonated directly within my consciousness. "How was it?" one asked eagerly. "What did you learn? What can you tell us?" I stood before them, bewildered. Their questions implied a pre-existing relationship, as if I had gone on a journey at their behest and was now reporting back. But I had no memory of them or any prior arrangement. My confusion must have been evident because one of them stepped closer, examined me intently, then turned to the others with what I can only describe as a mischievous grin. "He doesn't remember us," he announced, and all three erupted in what seemed like childlike giggling. Their amusement wasn't malicious. It was the gentle laughter you might share with family members over an inside joke. There was genuine affection in it, though I remained confused by the entire situation. "I'm having a little trouble here," I explained. "Everything is very strange from my perspective. I think I might remember you, but I need some time to adjust." This only seemed to delight them further, and they began bouncing slightly on their toes, exchanging glances with each other, as if my disorientation was both expected and entertaining. As this exchange continued, I became aware of another presence in the room. Standing slightly behind the three smaller beings was a taller figure who carried an unmistakable air of authority. Unlike the others, this being appeared more human-like in proportion, tall and willowy with an ethereal quality to his movements. When he stepped forward, everything changed. The moment his gaze met mine, I felt a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed me. My chest expanded, my throat tightened, and tears welled in my eyes. What emanated from this being was love in its purest form, unconditional, all-encompassing, perfect love. It radiated from him like heat from a sun, washing over me in waves that penetrated to my core. His face bore an expression of such joy that it bordered on ecstasy. His eyes were wide and bright, eyebrows raised in perpetual delighted surprise, and his smile conveyed infinite compassion. He was clearly in charge, yet his authority came not from domination, but from wisdom and benevolence. He was the kind of leader anyone would willingly follow, the best boss imaginable. When he moved toward me, the feeling intensified. The love pouring from him was so overwhelming it was almost paralyzing. I wanted to fall to my knees, not in worship but because the emotion was too immense to bear while standing. I fought back sobs, not of sadness, but of recognition. Something in me knew him, loved him in return with a depth I had never experienced in my earthly life. As we communicated, I noticed that each time I spoke, he responded with a gentle chuckle that I could feel resonating inside my own being. It wasn't mockery but affection, like a parent delighting in a child's earnest questions. The dynamic reminded me of a father with infinite patience for his beloved child. Gathering my courage, I addressed the situation directly. "I'm not going back there. No way, no how, ever. So I guess I need to move on from this place eventually. What's next? A review of my life? Would you like to start with that?" This declaration seemed to particularly amuse him. His laughter was like music, and I felt it not just as sound, but as vibration throughout my being. Sure, he said, with twinkling eyes. "Let's do that. How would you like to start?" Taking his response as encouragement, I began recounting regrets and missed opportunities from my life. I told him about a job Sarah and I had been offered years ago, caretakers for a wildlife sanctuary on a remote island off the coast. She had wanted it badly. The isolation, the connection with nature, the simplicity. But I had chosen the excitement of firefighting instead. "I wish I'd done that for her," I explained earnestly. "She never asks for anything, but she wanted that." I continued with other stories, times I'd failed to appreciate moments that mattered, choices I'd made from fear rather than love, opportunities for growth I had missed. But as I spoke, I gradually realized something strange. Nobody was really listening. The tall being maintained his loving presence, but there was no judgment or evaluation in his manner. The three smaller beings had drifted to other tasks around the facility, clearly uninterested in my recitation of earthly regrets. The life review I had expected, that judgment of deeds good and bad that features in so many near-death accounts, wasn't happening. It slowly dawned on me that I was the only one in the room who thought this was the end of my life. For them, this was just a brief visit, a check-in during an ongoing journey. I wasn't staying, and they all knew it. After letting me continue for what felt like a polite amount of time, the tall being stepped forward decisively. His expression remained loving but grew serious. "Okay, that's enough," he said with gentle firmness. "Time to go back." His words hit me like a physical blow. "What? Go back?" I protested, genuinely shocked. "I'm not going back there. There's no way." "You have to go back," he replied, his voice gentle but resolute. "You have things to do, and they're important." As he spoke these words, the three smaller beings seemed to receive some unspoken instruction. They disappeared from view, not dramatically, but simply moving elsewhere in the facility, their task with me apparently complete. It was just the tall being and me now, and as he stepped closer, his decision was clearly final. "You're going back." Fear and resistance rose within me. Back to pain, to limitation, to that dense, heavy existence. After experiencing this, it seemed like a cruel punishment rather than a gift. But I had no choice. The decision had been made, and not by me. "No," I pleaded, feeling desperate for the first time since leaving my body. "Please don't send me back." The tall being's expression remained compassionate but firm. There was no anger in his refusal, only certainty, the kind a parent might show when insisting a child take medicine they need but don't want. "You have to go back," he repeated. "Your work isn't finished." "What work?" I asked. "Tell me what's so important that I have to leave this." I gestured at the perfect peace surrounding us, for that suffering. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he simply stepped closer, his presence still radiating that overwhelming love, but now with an unmistakable authority that brooked no argument. As he moved toward me, I felt myself beginning to slip backward. The facility around us started to dissolve, not suddenly, but gradually, like a reflection on water disturbed by ripples. The walls, the equipment, the indirect lighting, all began to lose definition. "Wait," I cried out. "At least tell me why. Tell me what I'm supposed to do." His final smile was gentle, knowing, "You'll understand when you need to." With those words, the facility and the tall being faded like mist under morning sun. I was being pulled away, not rising as I'd expected, but descending. The sensation wasn't physical. It was more like shifting frequencies, moving from a higher vibration to a lower one. I passed through darkness, but this wasn't the star-filled expanse I'd traveled through before. This darkness was heavy, oppressive, empty. There were no stars here, no light, no sense of companionship or belonging. If the realm of light had been absolute connection, this place was absolute isolation. Time meant nothing in this darkness. It could have been seconds or centuries that I drifted through this desolate space. The joy and love I'd experienced began to feel distant, like a dream fading upon waking. In their place came a growing heaviness, a density, a limitation closing in from all sides. This wasn't hell. There was no punishment, no fire, no torment beyond the aching loneliness. It was more like a waiting room, a neutral space between worlds. Yet it was a place no soul would choose to linger. As I descended deeper through this darkness, I began to sense something below me, something physical and familiar. Sounds reached me faintly at first, then with growing clarity, the electronic beep of medical equipment, urgent voices, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. The hospital. I was returning to my body. The descent accelerated, and suddenly I felt a violent jolt, like being thrown into ice water. Sensation flooded back, pain, weight, confinement. My lungs burned as they filled with air. My skin felt hypersensitive, each point where it touched the sheets a separate discomfort. My heart hammered in my chest with the labored rhythm of machinery being forced to restart. The contrast between the limitless expansion I'd just experienced and this confinement within flesh was excruciating. I wanted to cry out, to beg to be released again, but my earthly voice hadn't yet reconnected to my consciousness. Slowly, with agonizing reluctance, I settled back into my body. The perfect awareness I'd possessed beyond began to dim, replaced by the limited perception of physical senses. The body I'd so recently regarded as a discarded husk was once again my vehicle, my prison, my home. I opened my eyes to the harsh fluorescent lighting of the hospital room. A nurse stood over me, her expression transforming from professional concern to astonished relief. "You're awake," she exclaimed, reaching for my wrist to check my pulse. The weight of being human again pressed down on me. I had returned, against my will, for reasons I didn't yet understand, and I was furious about it. The nurse's eyes widened as she registered my consciousness. "You're awake," she repeated, her professional composure momentarily replaced by genuine surprise. I tried to speak, but found my throat dry and raw from the breathing tube they must have inserted during resuscitation. She quickly brought a small cup of water with a straw, holding it to my lips. After taking a sip, I grabbed her wrist with surprising strength for someone who had just been resuscitated. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice hoarse but urgent. "I'll get the doctor," she replied, clearly relieved. "We've been worried about you. We didn't know what was going to happen." "That's fine," I said, "but first, what am I doing back here?" Her expression shifted from relief to confusion. "What do you mean?" "I was home," I said, unable to hide my frustration. "I made it out. I struggled to find words that wouldn't sound completely insane. I was somewhere else, somewhere better. How did I end up back here?" Recognition dawned in her eyes. She'd heard this kind of talk before from patients who'd been resuscitated. "Honey," she said with gentle wisdom, "you've been in escrow, but you fell out of escrow, and now you're back with us. You're going to have to get your head around that." Her simple, matter-of-fact explanation hit me with unexpected clarity. In real estate, escrow is the transitional period between agreeing to sell a property and completing the transaction. I had been in transition, between life and whatever comes after, but the transaction hadn't completed. I'd been sent back. Sarah appeared at the doorway, her face tear-streaked but radiantly happy. The doctor followed close behind, already reviewing my chart and vital signs. While they checked my condition and explained what had happened medically, cardiac arrest from an allergic reaction to the medication, 4 minutes without a pulse, successful resuscitation with 3 rounds of CPR, and 2 shocks from the defibrillator, I remained strangely detached. My body was here, responding to their questions, submitting to their examinations, but my mind kept returning to that realm of perfect love and acceptance. The contrast between that unlimited existence and this confined one felt almost unbearable. The weight of being in a physical form again, with all its limitations and discomforts, pressed in from all sides. As the medical staff celebrated their success in saving me, I was silently mourning what I had lost. I had touched something eternal, perfect, and complete, and now I was expected to return to the mundane world of paperwork, bills, and bodily functions as if nothing had happened. How could I possibly explain to them that they hadn't saved me? They had recalled me from salvation. The first few weeks after my return were the hardest. I moved through the world like a stranger in a foreign land, unable to communicate what I had experienced in a way others could truly understand. Even Sarah, despite her faith and open heart, struggled to comprehend the depth of what had happened to me. "It's like I've been to the top of a mountain that nobody else has climbed," I tried explaining one night as we sat on our porch watching the sunset. "And now I'm back in the valley, trying to describe the view using a language that doesn't have the right words." Slowly, reluctantly, I began the process that the nurse had advised, getting my head around being back. The spiritual teachers and mystics have a phrase for this. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Return to the ordinary tasks of living, but bring your new understanding with you. What exactly had I learned? The insights were both simple and profound. First, the emotions that trouble us most, anger, jealousy, resentment, fear, don't travel with us when we die. They're temporary tools for learning, not permanent aspects of who we are. Just as you wouldn't take your hammer and saw with you after building a house, these emotions are simply instruments for soul building that we leave behind when their purpose is complete. Second, everything in existence operates on different frequencies or vibrations. When we're alive, we experience the dense, heavy vibration of physical matter. In death, we return to the lighter, faster vibration that's our natural state. The cosmic orgasm I felt wasn't some supernatural miracle. It was simply the relief of returning to our true frequency, like a musical note finally played at its correct pitch after being distorted. The place I had been, that star-filled realm of absolute love, wasn't heaven in the religious sense. It was home, our natural state, where we all come from and where we all return. We get glimpses of it during life in moments of transcendent joy, deep meditation, or profound connection, but these are just echoes of our true nature. As for the dark place I passed through during my return, I came to understand this wasn't hell or punishment, but a transitional state. Many spiritual traditions describe similar concepts. The Tibetan Buddhists call it bardo. Catholics might call it purgatory. Ancient Egyptians named it duat. It's an in-between realm where souls who leave their bodies in confusion or strong attachment might linger until they recognize their true nature. I spent months researching other near-death experiences, finding comfort in the similarities. One woman described being in a coma for weeks, trapped in a dark, frightening place until she remembered a hymn she used to sing in church. When she began singing it internally, she was immediately lifted out of that darkness. Another man recounted meeting beings of light who showed him his life's purpose with perfect clarity. Edgar Cayce, the famous American mystic, described leaving his body hundreds of times during his readings. He would always follow a point of light to navigate safely through what he called the realm of nightmares, a first level filled with distorted forms and confused souls, before ascending to higher realms where he could access the information he sought. These accounts helped me understand that my experience wasn't unique or imaginary. It was part of a pattern recognized across cultures and throughout history. The most challenging aspect was integrating this cosmic perspective into everyday life. How do you care about mortgage payments when you've experienced the infinite? How do you engage in office politics when you've seen how temporary and ultimately meaningless such concerns are? The answer came gradually. You bring the higher vibration into the lower one. You live as an ambassador of that realm of perfect love, translating its reality into forms that can exist in this denser world. I returned to firefighting 6 months after my experience, but I was a different man. When I held the hand of a car accident victim waiting for the jaws of life to free them, I could share a calmness that came from absolute certainty that death is not the end. When a young mother wept over her child suffering from smoke inhalation, I could comfort her with a presence that had touched the infinite. My near-death experience hadn't given me all the answers. I still had questions, doubts, and struggles. But it had shown me with unmistakable clarity that we are more than our bodies, more than our troubles, more than our earthly identities. We are, at our core, beings of light, temporarily wearing the costume of humanity. 30 years have passed since my heart stopped in that overcrowded hospital, and in that time I've spoken with hundreds of people about what happened to me. Some dismiss it as hallucination, some embrace it as proof of their particular faith, and many simply listen with wonder. Whatever their reaction, I feel compelled to share one fundamental truth. We have death completely backwards. What we call death, that moment when the body ceases to function, isn't an ending but a magnificent transition. It's not a tragedy but a homecoming. When we stand weeping at funerals, dressed in black and speaking in hushed tones, we're grieving what is actually a liberation, a return to our natural state of boundless joy and connection. I don't say this to minimize the genuine pain of loss. The separation is real, and the grief is valid. I've felt it myself when losing loved ones, even with my knowledge of what awaits. But that grief is for us, the ones left behind, not for those who have gone ahead. They aren't lost. They haven't ceased to exist. They've simply slipped out of physical form and returned home, a bit further up the trail than we are, but still connected to us in ways our limited human perception can barely glimpse. What awaits us isn't judgment or punishment or even reward. It's recognition. It's remembering who we truly are beneath the temporary identities we've adopted for this physical experience. If I could sum up everything I learned in that brief journey beyond the veil, it would be this. Death is a 10 million% upgrade, instantaneously. Everything that weighs us down here, pain, fear, limitation, separation, falls away, revealing the magnificent beings we've always been beneath these costumes of flesh. So live fully, love deeply, learn from the challenges this world presents. But know with absolute certainty that when your time comes, you're not ending, you're just going home. When Bill Letson's heart stopped beating in that Santa Barbara hospital, he discovered something that speaks directly to our deepest human concerns. For Americans in midlife, those of us between 35 and 65, Bill's experience resonates with particular power. We stand at a unique crossroads. We've lived long enough to lose people we love. We've attended funerals of parents, friends, perhaps even children. We've felt that hollow ache of separation and wondered, is this truly the end? At the same time, we're increasingly aware of our own mortality. The invincibility of youth has faded. We notice new aches, unexpected diagnoses, the subtle signs that our physical bodies won't last forever. And we wonder, what awaits me? Bill's message cuts through our cultural silence around death. In a society that hides dying behind hospital doors and speaks of the deceased in hushed tones, his account offers a radical alternative. What if death isn't the tragedy we've made it out to be? Think about the people you've lost. Your father who taught you to fish, your college roommate who lost her battle with cancer, your childhood friend who died too young. According to Bill, they haven't disappeared into nothingness. They've simply shed the heavy costume of human form and returned to a state of perfect love and belonging, the same state that awaits us all. This isn't just spiritual comfort. It's a profound reframing of how we live our remaining years. If death isn't the enemy, but simply a transition, how might that change your priorities today? Would you still postpone those conversations with your adult children? Would career achievement still dominate your sense of purpose? Would you continue nursing those old grudges that keep you separate from people you once loved? Bill's journey reminds us that the things that travel with us beyond the threshold aren't our achievements, possessions, or status. What continues are the connections we've forged, the love we've given, the growth we've achieved in understanding who we truly are beneath our temporary identities. For Americans who grew up with religious teachings about heaven and hell, Bill's experience offers something both familiar and revolutionary, confirmation that something awaits us, but perhaps not exactly as we were taught. For those who've embraced secular worldviews, his account challenges the assumption that consciousness ends when the brain stops functioning. Whatever your beliefs, Bill's story invites you to consider, what if the greatest fear in human experience, the fear of death, is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? What if what we perceive as an ending is actually a homecoming? This doesn't mean abandoning grief when we lose someone. The separation is real, and the pain is valid. But perhaps we can hold that grief alongside a deeper understanding, that those we've lost aren't suffering or extinguished, but transformed and reunited with their true nature. As we navigate the complexities of midlife, with its responsibilities, reflections, and reckonings, Bill's message offers not just comfort but liberation. The pressure to succeed before time runs out, to accumulate experiences and possessions before the final curtain. All these anxieties fade when we understand that the curtain isn't final at all. So take a moment today to reconsider your relationship with death, both the deaths you've witnessed and the one that eventually awaits you. What might change if you truly believed, as Bill does, that it's not an ending, but a magnificent transition? Perhaps, like Bill, you might find yourself living more fully in this temporary, beautiful human experience, knowing with certainty that when the time comes, you're not leaving, you're going home. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.